Morning break on Teachers Talk Radio every Tuesday between 9 to 10 a.m. This morning we're talking to a full performing arts panel of guests about the importance of art, drama, music and dance to the curriculum. Do comment on social media, messaging your thoughts via the chat on the Podbean app, or call in to share your thoughts on the importance of art subjects this morning break on Teachers Talk Radio.
Live from London, this is the Morning Break with Emma Sheppard on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live on the Podbean app or desktop player. Just head over to www.podbean.com/LSW/TT Radio or search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TT Radio.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you have had a lovely morning. Slightly more sunshine and less wind than last week today. So I always just have a little mention of the weather because it does cheer us up a little bit when it's doing nice things. So I hope wherever you are listening this morning, things are looking good for you. I wanted to talk about the art subject this morning on our show, simply because I'm surrounded by so many fantastic art subject teachers. And it's something that was really, really important to me when I was at school. Maybe something I've lost a little bit as a practitioner growing up. I'm a bit of a lapsed musician, but something that when I was at school really dominated my education and my extracurricular activities. I think there wasn't a single day of the week where I wasn't doing something that involved music or drama. And I am still very, very proud of my A-star in art, even though I haven't picked up a paintbrush since. It's developed in me a real appreciation of theatre, of dance, not that I do it myself unless I have had a few drinks, physical storytelling, art exhibitions, and just the understanding of how important creative arts are to our mental health. And they can challenge us, they can soothe us, and sort of express the world that we are living in. I think they are so important to our lives as human beings. And I can see that we've got a number of our guests already in the studio with us today on the Podbean app. So if you are listening live, it would be fantastic to hear your thoughts or any of your questions in the Podbean app chat as we go along today, really to get this discussion going. Because something that we have really seen, especially in the last 10 years, is maybe a depreciation of the art subjects in school. And as much as we can love them as individuals and we can promote them with our own children, I know that seeing my own children's creative expression being nurtured at nursery and being able to take them to the galleries and the concert halls and even during lockdown, the street art and the parks and gardens that we're lucky enough to have in London is a huge part of the education that I am committed to giving them as parents. And even the simple things like appreciating the art in picture books or doing messy play with them and craft at home, which is not my favourite thing, but I do commit to it because I know how important it is to their growth as human beings. But since 2010, when the EBAC was introduced, this is a huge talking point. The art subjects have been hugely impacted and partly overshadowed by other curriculum changes, the pandemic and other trends in education. We have maybe stopped talking as much as we used to do about promoting the arts and making sure that despite the restrictions maybe of the EBAC requirements, that the arts are still fully promoted in our schools. And it's quite interesting. We think that the EBAC was introduced in 2010. And so 10 years on now in 2021, what impact has that actually really had in our schools? Has it been as bad as we thought it was going to be? And now that we've had a year of pandemic, has that impacted take up the art subject or ability to appreciate the arts or arts education even further? Well, I love to do a bit of research for my show, especially when I'm speaking outside of my subject area or outside of my area of expertise. And there was a Cultural Learning Alliance report from 2018, and this will all be linked on the at Maternity CTV Twitter handle with at TT Radio 2021 tagged in as well. But this report said that arts GCSE entries have fallen 28% since 2010. The number of hours that art subjects are taught in secondary schools has fallen 17% since 2010. And the number of arts teachers, so actually recruitment and teachers that we have teaching the art subject within our schools has fallen by 16% since 2010. So they're obviously making this huge connection between the introduction of the EBAC and the impact that that's had on the way that we are teaching and enjoying art subjects in our school. Now, they do make a comparison there with the EBAC subjects of history and geography, which saw an increase in the number of teachers that we have in schools and the hours taught of between 11 and 23%. So they're really sort of emphasising this report from the Cultural Learning Alliance. They're really emphasising that this drive for what the government considers a more academic curriculum has had a big impact on our art subject. And with the pandemic closing theatres and concert halls, restricting clubs and music lessons outside of school, and placing limitations on what we've even been able to do, I mean, even children facing each other or working together in groups in the classroom, for over a year, we're possibly in a bit of a bleak situation for the art subject in our schools. So today, our guests on the show are going to be telling us how they have weathered this storm and how maybe there have been some silver linings for the hopeful art, music, drama and dance teachers amongst us. So I'm going to invite our first guest now to join us to tell us a little bit about her own experience. Amy is an art teacher and she's currently on her second maternity leave. So she may be joining us with her little baby noises. They are more than welcome. Amy, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm actually swaying as we talk.
Well,
I have my sling on, so we're swaying. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we'll get the rhythm, but we're not going to be talking about dance, but you're maybe in the right spirit for it. You're an art teacher, Amy. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role as you are swaying? I'm swaying with you now
yes. So I'm actually a mum of two girls now, and one's coming up to 3, and I've got a 5-week-old with me now. I'm currently director of teaching and learning. Actually, I got this post on my last maternity leave, but prior to that I was head of art, and I've been teaching for 14 years, and I'm still teaching art now, still teaching A level and helping out with GCSE and lower down the school as well. But yeah, so yeah, I did a fine art degree, and art's pretty much been my life since school myself.
And we do find with a lot of art subject teachers that you have this, maybe not a split, but a leaning maybe between teachers of love of the subject versus love of the sort of social changes they can make. And I do find art teachers and really such a love of the subject within art teachers. They're real specialists, really trained and real practitioners.
True. True.
I know on your first maternity leave, you took the opportunity to develop your practice and sort of do a lot of subject knowledge development in galleries and in London. So what are your favourite memories of that time? And when you actually came back to the classroom, how did you bring those ideas back from your time on maternity leave?
Yeah, sure. I think firstly, just linking on what you were saying there about the different, teachers really engaging in their subject, especially in art. I think for me personally, one of my fundamental sort of values is that teaching and teaching art are very important to each other. So the pedagogical side, I think for me, is underpinned by a lot of the stuff that I teach within art. So the creativity and the innovation that it's very intrinsic, it's very natural to what we do as art teachers. I think there's a real place for that across the school. So during my mat leave, it was really important to me to maintain that and keep going to galleries. And I was just so excited to take my first daughter, to galleries, and having seen people bring their children before, when I've been there without children, I was excited to see her sort of crawling around on the floor and to take her in a sling. And I think, considering people think that galleries can be quite elitist, I think sometimes people are quite concerned about going to galleries. My experience has always been the very opposite, and I find them very inclusive. And most of them are free in London, and then also they're very open to children coming, but buggies coming. You've got very good access. So my great memories are going with friends with babies and slings and going to the Saatchi Gallery, wandering around there. And then also, I think I also took my daughter, which is a little bit older, approaching 1. I took her to the summer exhibition in the Royal Academy, and just seeing her sort of crawl or mumble around works of art. And people around us loved it. It was a great experience, and it was great to be able to have that experience where I could do something that I really was passionate about, but my daughter could also get involved in as well. And I think I found that as a parent, it's hard to do both at the same time. You're often giving yourself to your children and doing things that they want to do, whereas this was something we both could get a lot out of.
Absolutely. And I find, I mean, I had similar experiences. I do live in London, and we are completely spoiled for choice in terms of free museums and galleries that we've got on our doorstep. And what I found fascinating, even when they were babies, the things that my children would respond to, and therefore thinking about the ways that I was sort of doing visuals in my own classroom. I'm an English teacher, but the way to what sort of sparked their attention and what made them sit up and take notice, or the things they wanted to touch or grab hold of, and thinking about how the aesthetics sort of engaged our minds, and almost for me as an English teacher, how I could use aesthetics as a step into something that words essentially that students might not find as accessible. And I agree with you in terms of the deception around the elitism of galleries. I have never felt more welcome than when I've been in an art gallery with children. So many of them are sort of, accessible with lifts and ramps and quiet spaces. And what I've found as they've got older, you might find this with your eldest as well, as galleries are starting to open up. There are so many sort of children's activities at the weekend or in the morning, toddler activities that are really sophisticated for my mind as well as theirs. And those are some of the activities that I can see, you could transfer this directly back into a primary classroom or into a Key Stage 3 or GCSE classroom. And it's almost like I'm giving, if I were an art teacher, being given free CPD or being given the opportunity to observe in somebody else's lesson, to see how they would teach a particular skill, or get students going with a particular activity, or use an activity to inspire something else. So really, really fortunate there. Thanks for sharing.
I think, and to add on to that, I know the Tate Modern, for example, they do a lot of CPD for teachers who don't teach art but teach other subjects, and they show you how it can fit in with your subject. So yeah, definitely. And I think one thing I'm actually looking forward to coming out of lockdown is the fact that it's one of the positives for me is that you have to book a time to go into the gallery, so you're guaranteed space. And and you're not crowded, and especially those weekend ones you're talking about. I know from experience that it can get extremely busy, and it's not always as a nice an experience at the weekend. But it will be like that for now, so that's something to enjoy.
So yeah, a bit of a silver lining in there. It's still free, but it's maybe a little bit calmer. And so during lockdown, you were still teaching last year before your second girl came along. I'm always wondering, I saw lots of things on social media where students were sort of doing big murals on their wall, or they were being given the opportunity to really get into big art projects. And so to what extent did you find with your students that lockdown actually provided them with a safer space for their mental health in terms of using arts as a way to meditate, or to be present, or to get into bigger projects that maybe an hour's lesson or a double period at school wouldn't necessarily give them that opportunity?
Well, I think there's a few things there. I think first of all, one difference that it's probably important to add is that I teach at an independent school, not at a state school. So I do feel that my experience of art, teaching art, is very much valued within my school. I'm not saying that's not how it is for state schools across the board, but I'm in a really fortunate position anyway. And we are definitely valued as part of the wider school curriculum as well. So with the lockdown, it provided an opportunity for within art and within wider teaching and learning that was going on across the school for us all to be more creative and innovative in the way that we were teaching. Especially if you can imagine, if you're teaching drawing or painting at school, that's just something you just can't do remotely, because you can't go over and help them. And that's a key part of teaching those skills, is being able to have that one-to-one. And we were struggling a lot before December at school doing that, because we were essentially in a box at the front of the room. So we've had to be a lot more creative and innovative about the materials that we're using and the subject matter that we are working with, and how they interact with each other as well. And I think that's actually, it has brought a lot of silver linings as well in that respect. We've been able to get the students to really think about their space and observing the space around them, like working within their home. Who's in your home with you, and what materials do you have available, and what can you see out your window? How do you interact with the outside and the inside of your house? Those sort of things have been really important, I think, to having that sort of success, and getting students to engage in what's important to them. It's very much their surroundings where they spend most of their time, especially in lockdown, but out of lockdown as well. What makes things important to you? We found some students who perhaps were more distracted in class, shall we say, were actually producing some of their best work at home, because they didn't have those distractions, or they were engaged in things that really interested them. So we did, thinking about actual evidence of this, I think, we had lots of different schemes of work that we put together. I teach at a boys' school, so we actually, one of the schemes of work was to do embroidery, which is something that they hadn't necessarily experienced at school. A sixth form project, we were looking at using unusual materials to paint with, so they had to empty the kitchen cupboards and do portraits. And we had students who were painting onto mirrors. We had students who had old pieces of wallpaper up on the wall, and they were doing huge scale pieces of artwork, using cameras a lot more, capturing things that are going on around the house. Lots of that was within the curriculum, but then with outside of the curriculum, which I think, like you're saying, for that social and emotional side is just as important. We had the Blue Cube, which was on our school website, which, like the White Cube in London, we were asking students, parents and teachers to submit work to be displayed, not necessarily having a prize at the end of it, but just sharing the creative things that we were doing. And we have a DT teacher who's really into wood turning, so he was sharing a lot of his work. We had a lot of collaborative work as well, so different subjects sharing things that they were doing within their subjects. So trying to build that sense of community in a time when we all felt quite isolated was really important as well. And we're part of a bigger foundation, which includes some elderly care homes. So the school participated in a postcard initiative, and everybody submitted postcards, which then got printed off and shared with the local community as well. So community is very much at the heart of what we do as a school, and it was really exciting that art could be a part of that as well.
Definitely, and a huge congratulations to your art department, for yourself being involved in that. Sounds, I mean, you heard the little noises I was making, just really touching, and I think real evidence of how important these art subjects are for our humanity. Because I think a lot of the time, art subjects get talked about, well, they're good because they support, these skills which we need for other subjects. But actually, they are so important as standalone subjects, and for the impact that they have in their own right. So thank you. Those are just such lovely anecdotes to share there. Is there anywhere, I mean, if there are any art teachers listening who want to get a bit of inspiration from some of the more creative projects that you were talking about, is there anywhere that you have shared these online, or that you would recommend that they go?
I haven't actually, but I can make those available. If we can somehow link them, I'll try and get them to share. That's yeah, we haven't shared them as yet actually, but that's definitely something to do.
Some of those wallpaper and mirror installations just sound fascinating.
Yeah.
And so lastly, Amy, I mean, thinking projecting to the future, how far do you think that this period of COVID and lockdown will influence young artists in shaping their artistic expression as they go forwards with their studies and with their art careers, for those students that do take it further?
Well, I think there's two sides to that. I think looking at the negative side, first of all, get that one out of the way. I think we've already seen with our Year 12 students, last year, obviously, they were given a CAG grade. So they came in with, a lot of them are quite higher than perhaps they might have experienced otherwise, and some might be, well, they shouldn't be any lower really, because they would have been teacher assessed. So there's definitely work on catch up that we're doing at the moment at A level. And then I think we'll see that again for a few more years, especially as for GCSE and A-level art and design this year, we've only had to submit their coursework or their sort of portfolio work, which is only 60% of what they would normally do. So there's a lot of skills that are attached to art, especially like time management and being able to prioritize and be able to spend a sustained amount of time on pieces of work. And if they haven't got those skills at that level of GCSE and A level, then to go on further, there's definitely catch up that needs to be done in order to do that. So that is the negative of we've got some work to do. But on the positive side, I think what really underpins art and design as a subject is this sense of creativity and innovation, resilience, that growth mindset, all of those different things we bang on about when we talk about pedagogy. Because they underpin what we do in art, we've had this opportunity where they could really explore those and build those. So those students which have been able to grasp that and work quite independently are going to do fantastically, I think, and have that opportunity where they may have really found that they really enjoy art in this different surroundings. But those at the other end of the spectrum, and we've seen this with my teaching and learning hat on from across the board, those who are at the other end of the spectrum and have not been as motivated, or have had loads of other things which are challenges and things which have stood in their way, are going to struggle to catch up. So yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But I think looking more widely and thinking more theoretically about the young artists, I think things like Grace and Perry's Art Club and Anthony Gormley's Art Initiative have really sparked an interest in society about what art is and what it can do. And it's much more than just painting by numbers, as my parents would say, or colouring inside the lines. That's not what I've spent most of my life trying to master. I think we're starting to realise there's a lot more that art can do for us as people, as whole people.
Definitely. I think very much a holistic conversation this morning. So thank you so much for joining us today, Amy, and it was lovely to hear a few little noises from your daughter there. I hope you have a lovely rest of the morning. And do keep adding your thoughts to the chat as we speak to the rest of our guests.
Really, thank you so much.
So we heard there from Amy, who's really sharing some innovative and creative ideas with us about how, as an art teacher, she and the rest of her department have maybe overcome some of the barriers that have presented themselves because of lockdown in their art classrooms, but also talking quite realistically about some of the things that will continue maybe to negatively impact our young artists of the future. So if you've had similar experiences of having to push the boundaries in your classrooms, being a little bit more creative in your thinking in order to get students to a place where you would normally have been able to get them if you'd been actually physically with them or been able to get behind their desks, then we'd love to hear them on the chat. So please do share in the Podbean app chat if you are with us live this morning. And if you're listening later, you can use the hashtag #TTRadio hashtag to share your comments via Twitter. You can tag us in @TTRadio2021. And my personal hashtag is @MaternityCPD. There'll also be a whole thread pinned to the @MaternityCPD handle on some of the reports that I talked about just before we had Amy on today. And any more reading recommendations that you have to share live, please do put them in the chat. Or you can add them to that thread if you are listening later, to help us to share these creative ideas and maybe some examples of the work that Amy was talking about this morning, and any other work that you are particularly proud of from your students. We'd love to be able to see them on Twitter, on the TT Radio hashtag, and tag to the thread for this morning's show. So that was Amy talking about art. Our next guest is going to talk to us a little bit about dance and the role of dance in the curriculum, and also how dance has been impacted by the pandemic in the same way that Amy did when she was talking about art. So Jess Truslove is a dance teacher, but Jess, I will let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your role and your experience of teaching dance so far.
Hi Emma, thanks for having me. I am an RQT and I'm based at a school in the West Midlands. It's a fairly new role that I started in September, and I run a single person dance department in a secondary school, and I'm responsible for the RSL level 2 dance and Key Stage 3 dance, and I also teach PE. And I also work in the community as a head of ballet, jazz and tap in a dance company. I recently completed my MA in dance technique pedagogy and was on a programme with Matthew Bourne's New Adventures Overture to develop me as a teacher and as an artist and in my career progression. And recently joined Teach Meet PE as a team member also, because I'm really passionate about integrating more dance into schools, because I feel if we can't get it as an independent subject all of the time, then we need to find those other avenues to employ dance into the curriculum. As it is a fairly new role, I have worked in schools before and I'm a fairly new teacher. It's been really, really refreshing to kind of see how, you know, the lockdown has changed students' perspectives, but also my perspective of the subject.
Amazing to hear again how much training and how much of a specialist you are in your subject there, Jess. And I mean, as you listed a number of types of dance there, what do you think is your specialism and your passion there that you love in particular sharing with children?
I mean, when we think about styles of dance, we can sort of categorise them, and that can sometimes not include every single child. So I would definitely say that I really love teaching choreography to students because there's such a freedom with it and such a, you know, an inclusive an approach where the whole child is considered, not just the aesthetic of what the performance looks like, but how we can develop the children intellectually, in a cognitive way, but also in a practical way to really, you know, access their very best that they can be.
Yeah, really sort of that leadership and that design element of dance, you know, bringing something together that they've created. So realistically, you mentioned lockdown a little bit there being quite a positive thing and maybe raising the profile of dance with the students. But realistically, how has this last year impacted dance as a subject at school and in the wider community?
Yeah, I mean, there's been benefits, definitely, but there's also been, you know, hindrances, and it gave us a bigger impact in what we could really offer, especially in a new role. I really wanted to be able to go into the school that I'm at and really raise the profile. And it's hard to do that when you can't run extracurricular, can't run all those exciting opportunities due to social distancing. But I think dance is such a visual, auditory and tactile and kinesthetic art form. And I think it's that missing that joyous feeling and buzz of everybody being in the studio together, moving around. I don't think I realised how much, you know, freedom has been taken away. So many barriers. You can't move around the space as you used to be able to. And students have felt confined. I've definitely felt confined as a teacher. It can make us feel quite stagnant. But I think it's given us a real opportunity for myself to develop the whole child. As dance teachers, we know how important the whole child is, and I'm really a champion for this, but it's kind of like taking a step back and really reflecting on your practice and thinking, well, actually, was I doing that? And was I provoking and evoking all these different feelings that dance makes us feel, and getting students to talk about it a little bit more? And I think the great thing about working virtually is we did have to stop. We did have to look after our bodies. But it was more about the passion and igniting the passion of the subject for students, not necessarily the technique or, you know, the command instructions that can sometimes come with dance, which we don't really want, because we want students to feel that they're taking ownership of their own ideas. And we really took time to talk on the chat to each other and really discuss some of our feelings and passions and how it felt to move in our own space, because it's so unusual to take yourself out of a community of people. And that's what really the dance studio is for me. It's a community of young people who are aspiring to be the best that they can be. But it's given us a lot of reflection time and time to really think about what's important within the subject, and really look into what individually, you know, we enjoy.
And so when you have been physically together in the dance studio, I mean, we did have a period in the autumn term, whether it was disrupted or not, and we're obviously getting back to things now. You're right, it is such, I mean, my experience of dancing is clubs as a student, or my kitchen with my children now. But also there's a sort of session called 5 Rhythms that I go to as well with my sister, who is very much into dance, and I can take the children. It's lovely, but what all of those things are that group community feeling that you are part of a unit, part of masses of bodies, and that's where a lot of the energy comes from, is being with other people once you get over your inhibitions. So how are you having to be more creative with the social distancing measures when you are together with your students in the dance studio now or in the autumn term?
I think if I bring it back to the most important values for me in dance would be that authenticity, curiosity, and the kindness that you get from a dance studio. And I really liked how you were talking about, that great feeling about being in a room full of people. And it has been really difficult because I think the social distancing aspect, as a dance teacher and from students who I've spoken to, not being able to use contact in the studio has sort of limited our capacity. But I think the creative element of it is we have to think outside the box. We have to do things that we wouldn't usually do. And it's about students being able to focus on their own identity as a dancer. I think as a teacher, I definitely had to think about my planning in a way that I'd never had to think about it before. Going into the studio and putting, a set of movement together, or asking students to enjoy themselves within their movement, there are limitations to that, because we can't move around the space. There was a time where we couldn't use the floor because I didn't have the capacity to be able to clean it due to timetabling. So we had to really think about, well, what can we use in our own box and our own space? And I did get students to think about this idea of a kinesthesia, which is like a circular space around you, and what they could do in that space. And it was really amazing to see the students doing things that they'd never done before. It was really refreshing. And I think it made me realise how much we can get into habits in our own learning, and really moving past those habits to create, innovative ways of moving. But I think if I think about in the community as well on Zoom, there are certain things that you can't do on Zoom. So I teach tap in the community, and trying to teach a tap class online is very difficult in terms of timing. But when students come back into the room and you have to keep them to that confined space, I think it's about exploring really the passion, not about thinking about we've got to get them back to the level that they were, because that takes time and patience. And I think it's that level of kindness that you create in the studio, to know that everybody's in the same situation. So we have to think creatively. We have to ask ourselves questions. And I think that comes back to that curiosity element, questioning different ideas, and really taking time to just stop and think and pause. And I think that's really had a really beneficial impact on our pedagogical practice in my dance department.
So reassuring to hear you talk about sort of that curiosity and maybe not the technical elements. I think I'd be one of your best students if I was just allowed to be passionate but have no technical skill whatsoever. So maybe I should jump into your dance classroom and show you my passion with no talent whatsoever.
I think the most joyous thing about moving is not the way it looks, it's the way it feels. And you know, I don't become a dance teacher to make the next prima ballerina or the next person on stage. If I do, then that's fantastic and that's brilliant. But there is so much more to dance than the way it looks. And I think a lot of students can get put off. I've heard so many students in the past say, you know, I don't think I want to do dance because I don't think I'm good enough. But the only person who tells them that they're not good enough is themselves. So this lockdown has really made me think I need to develop self-belief in them, because they've got to believe in themselves and highlight what's really important and unique and individual about themselves and embrace it.
And so one aspect that we haven't necessarily talked about is how important an audience is to maybe higher level dance. I mean, sometimes an audience can be prohibitive to students if they don't have that self-belief. But my majority of my interaction with dance has been as an audience member in theatres and in sort of professional studios. And just you can see how much the dancers need, that audience appreciation and holding that stage and having that attention. So how have we been able to replicate that maybe during lockdown and give our students or even our professional dancers that understanding of audience or that connection with audience?
That's a difficult one, actually, because I think there's something special, isn't there, about being able to go and watch a theatre performance. It's even the build-up of being in the room and everybody getting ready to watch and being present for it. But I think when students came back in September, I tended not to force the performance aspect on them, because it was about getting them back in the space and developing the love of learning. But as we've gone on, I think being able to do small group performances and having the opportunity to do that on Zoom, it's quite wonderful to see all these different students moving on the screen at the same time. It's like this wonderful dance film. And when students actually are able to take a step back and look, I think I, as a teacher, notice things that I wouldn't have noticed if I was at the theatre. We did do a virtual performance, which was with Black Country Dance Hub, New Horizons Digital Dance Festival. And it was so wonderful to get back some of that performance element, because we were able to sit down once all of the schools in the Black Country, all the dance companies, and watch it. And it was like being back in the theatre in a sense, because we'd been deprived of that for so long. We haven't been able to enjoy something together. We've either been sat at home watching something on the screen on our own. And I think as well, with all the retraining initiatives that the government have put into place, I think as arts people, we've pulled together and we've created our own audience in terms of what we believe in and our right to fight to be in society, as you spoke about at the beginning, you know, the deprivation of art subjects. And I think as soon as we are able to, I don't think there'll be hesitation. If you look at all of the theatres now, they're ready to go. They want to get people back in the theatre. And I think the unfortunate news about the 50% cut, possible 50% cut at higher education, will really have an impact on colleges, schools, and it makes me a little bit sad, because I think if people aren't training at higher education, then we're just forming this elite nature that dance is for those who can afford it. And I think the saddest thing about that is what happens when all of the artists who are now doing wonderful things retire. Where will be the younger generation? So I think it's about, you know, as soon as we can get back in the theatre, being able to embrace that and really, you know, watching as much art and supporting as much as we can.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jess, and for that final sort of call out and challenge for us to get back into the theatre as when we can and support our arts, especially if it's not going to be something that that is government funded in the way that we'd like, that a real community effort in terms of making sure that we we get that supported, funded, and accessible to our students in whatever way we can as a wider community. I hope you have a lovely rest of the day, and I'll definitely do a little bit of a kitchen dance with my children in your honour when I pick them up from school.
I am glad. I hope you have a wonderful time, and I thank you for speaking with me today.
So we've heard now from two really passionate teachers talking about their art subjects. We've heard from Amy talking about art and Jess talking about dance. And what is coming through again and again and again is this absolute passion for the subject, but also how much their subjects impact the well-being and the mental health and the soft skills that we need students to develop in order to be, productive human beings and to have a fulfilling life. There's a report from the Arts Council England about how art subjects are delivered in outstanding schools. And what it emphasises is how much problem solving, creativity, well-being and resilience, how much those skills are positively impacted by the art subject, and how much the arts contribute to not just the school community, but the wider community through performances and through sort of programs, extracurricular activity. So I think what has really always been quite important to me is valuing art subjects for the sake of them as subjects, not necessarily as something. I hear a lot that music is good for maths because it teaches you logic and your scales are really good for your numeracy, but actually music as an art and drama and dance as subjects in their own right, not necessarily just as those that complement other subjects. We're going to jump to the news now, and then after the news, we're going to hear from our next two guests talking to us about drama and music.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Megan Goods.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News. A campaign group of head teachers is asking exam boards to return 50% or more of the money spent by schools on this year's examinations. The amount could total more than £220 million, which the group want to use to help cope with the added strain to budgets caused by COVID-19. A spokesperson for the group said teachers, school leaders, and examination support staff have picked up an abundance of extra work and felt this should be reflected in the charges from exam boards. Last year, OCR, AQA, and Pearson refunded about a quarter of their exam fees. The three main exam boards, however, were all quoted saying that their costs are more than just examination and marking fees, and that the provision of assessment materials to schools and the upcoming autumn assessment season justify their fees. The NHS has laid out plans to have specialist mental health teams supporting almost 3 million school children by 2023. The plans come as a result of the detrimental impact the pandemic has had on children's mental health. A recent study found that 1 in 10 children had often or always felt lonely during the pandemic, and more than a quarter had had trouble sleeping. The NHS currently has the capacity to support 15% of school pupils in England, but plans to up that figure to 20 to 25% by 2022 and 35% by 2023. The scheme will receive £79 million in funding from the government's £500 million mental health services pot. Experts have warned that grade inflation in the upcoming summer assessments is inevitable, even with the additional levels of scrutiny promised by Ofqual. A second year of inflated results will make it increasingly more difficult for schools to return expectations to pre-pandemic levels next year. In 2020, there was a 13% increase in the number of A grades being achieved in A-level exams, and similar patterns are expected to be continued this year. Sir Michael Wilshaw, the former head of Ofsted, was quoted in The Guardian saying, "We know teachers err on the side of generosity. They will always give youngsters the benefit of the doubt, and there will be grade inflation. It's a question of how much. I think we will see roughly what we saw last year, which was 10 to 12% grade inflation." That was your daily education news briefing.
Really great to hear some of the connections there with the news and the ideas that we've been talking about in terms of mental health and well-being linked to the arts subject today. Really just a reminder about what we're doing in schools at the minute is far more than just the grades. Though, if I'm honest, it feels a lot about exam papers at the minute. We've been doing a great deal of marking, but so important that we've got a varied, a diverse, a balanced curriculum that offers students a whole range of ways to express themselves and to form their emotions, to articulate their emotions, and use their bodies in ways that they don't necessarily use them when they're sitting in an English classroom, a maths classroom, or a history classroom. So we're going to be hearing next from our guest, who is a drama teacher, and she is going to be telling us a little bit about how drama has been impacted by the curriculum. I'm sorry, Katie, I've just pressed the wrong button, so try once more and I will let you join as a guest if you just try and call in. So Katie is a drama teacher over in Wales, and she has been, let's see if I can invite you, Katie. She has been actually working from home during the last few weeks because she is pregnant and she's waiting for her little baby. Oh, that's because Katie's telling me in the chat it won't let me in. If you try again, Katie, it's because I pressed the wrong button, but we will get you in eventually. Let's see if we can invite you in. Not sure if we can. Oh dear, maybe I've messed it up. Let's see if we can allow calling. Oh, not sure what I've done there, Katie. Oh dear. So Katie was going to join us. Let's see if we can figure it out despite my technical. Oh, here we go. Well done. Well done. Oh no. Well, oh Katie.
Hi, good morning, Emma. Am I in?
Hooray! Well done. Oh, I haven't had technical hits like that. I pressed the wrong button to start with. You now, Katie.
Yes,
tell us more fluently than I did whilst I was pressing buttons about yourself and your role as a drama teacher.
Yes, no problem. So good morning, and thank you first of all, Emma, for having me this morning. So I'm a drama and English teacher. I work at a school in Bristol. I've been teaching now for about 4 years. Before I became a drama teacher, I actually trained at drama school and worked as a theatre director for a few years professionally. And also in that time was working as a director in residence at a few independent schools, and sort of working within the industry. And then I decided a few years later then that actually my passion was more in empowering young people to enjoy the arts and to engage in drama. And I'm really interested in how you make those links between, drama within the classroom and the industry. And that's kind of been my mission, I guess, since I became a drama teacher, is constantly making those links between the people that still work professionally and the students, and making their, their experiences of drama not only the typical, you can be an actor, but really, really thinking about the other aspects of theatre that are open and available to them. So really, really thinking about the fact that they can go into directing or producing or stage management or scenic art, or even into marketing, creative learning, any of those sort of areas of theatre as well that ignite that passion. As you said, I am currently pregnant, so I'm 37 weeks pregnant as of yesterday. So I'm on the countdown now to welcome in my first child. And in that time, I've actually been working from home. So there's been myself who've been teaching drama on through Zoom, through Google Meet, and then also a drama practitioner who is actually my mat leave has been teaching drama in the classroom. So it's been a really, really interesting experience in the fact that two drama teachers have been able to support the curriculum, but through two very different mediums. And I think we like to think that actually there's been a lot of benefits to this as well in terms of teacher workload, and also in terms of what we can both offer whilst one obviously is working remotely and the other is working within the classroom.
Amazing. And so nice to hear again that, you know, as a drama teacher, as a teacher of the arts, you've got so much experience, sort of real life in the industry, and bringing that passion of your degree subject and all your experience pre-teaching into your students. I imagine that as an English teacher, that gives you quite a nice scope to open doors for your students who maybe are not necessarily very confident in front of an audience, but are fascinated by the behind the scenes, the storytelling, you know, appreciative of the theatre and the drama world or the film world. How do you find that crossover? Are you able to bring drama into your English classroom a lot, or do you sort of keep the two separate?
No, I think, you know, there's a lot of crossover between English and drama. I think one of the biggest shifts was the fact that when the curriculum changed a few years back, you know, drama actually in a lot of the exam boards now has become quite academic in places, and there is lots of areas of the drama written paper that actually requires a lot of English skills in order for those students to achieve quite well in them. So I think actually there's been quite a good balance between what we teach within the English curriculum and then also what we teach in the drama studio. And I think being a drama teacher has also given me I also have the confidence and the opportunity that when we are teaching things such as Shakespeare, or we are teaching drama texts, that we can get them on their feet, that we can get them exploring those texts in a more physical way instead of sat there analytically looking at the language that's being used. So I think actually the crossover between the two subjects in a lot of ways, maybe this is to do with the school I work at as well, really does add value to the drama curriculum, because I think as the students have gone into GCSE or A level, they've sort of seen that actually the amount of academic knowledge that they need in addition to the performance knowledge that they need is on par, really. So I mean, like I said, that could be to do with the school. I mean, I'm very fortunate that the school I work in is very supportive of the arts, but I think that actually it has valued it a bit more at those higher levels. And I think actually the COVID and having to work remotely has really made us reevaluate our schemes of work on where we can sort of fit in those skills, so that actually when they do get to GCSE and A level and onwards, that actually they can make those connections between those earlier pieces of work that they're doing in Key Stage 3 and later on in the curriculum as well.
And so what did that look like in terms of the creativity? We've been in lockdown, we've been in the classroom, we've had half classes when people have been sent home, we've been able to look at each other, we've been not able to stand face to face. How have you managed to keep that love of drama alive in your students despite all of these sort of changes and restrictions that have been going on over the last year?
So I think the first thing that we had to do right at the start of the pandemic really was to look at our schemes of work and to look at what we could adapt from being very sort of practical schemes of work into schemes of work that they could do at home or online. So we adapted a lot of stuff where they could do things such as mask work. They can create masks at home, create model boxes of set designs and things like that at home, using recycled materials, using items they have around their house, so that obviously it's still open to every single child. There's no, elitism there in that respect. I think one of the greatest things that happened in lockdown for us as drama teachers, two things really. The first thing was the drama community that really came together through social media and really started sharing good practice. And I can honestly say that the drama teachers that I have met throughout that lockdown, just through social media, has been beneficial to my development as well as a teacher. And I think it made us all get together and work together to create schemes of work or to create interesting projects that all of our students could be engaged in. And the second thing I would say that has really helped is the fact that theatres started making a lot of their productions and their materials available to us as drama teachers, because as one of the wonderful things about doing drama at school is the ability to go to the theatre to watch live theatre, and unfortunately we couldn't do that. So when you've got all these students that have signed up to do, say, GCSE drama, and you're having to say to them, well, actually we can't see any theatre, the fact that we now had the National Theatre open up their archives, as well as all the RSC making things available on BBC iPlayer and those sort of things, it actually meant that we could watch those with our students and keep them engaged in our subject. And I know that we were able to share productions that were appropriate for Key Stage 3, as well as productions that were appropriate for older students as well. And I think one of the greatest things that's happened from that is that a lot of these platforms have now decided post-COVID, actually, we're going to continue to make these available to students, and we're going to continue to make these available to the public as well. And I think that really opens up theatre to the majority of people. It means it's no longer seen as something that's necessarily for those that can afford it, but actually if you can't afford to go to London, it's okay, because you could watch it at home and you can get not the same experience, but you can experience it. And I think that's been one of the greatest things as far as that is concerned, really.
I think I definitely agree with you there. I mean, I'm an English teacher as well, but we obviously have our drama texts, as you mentioned there, our Shakespeare and Deathline Spectacles every single year. But something that has been so helpful to us during lockdown is to be able to give students a link and say, watch this scene, especially even, for some of my higher ability learners in year 11, but also for some of my weaker learners, being able to just see Shakespeare, and my EAL students as well, who for them the language is incredibly challenging, but being able to see Shakespeare, because we've seen a lot of mini scenes that have been made available through the National Theatre and through the RSC, as you've mentioned there, just means that they actually have a chance of stepping into the text and understanding the emotions and the plot and the atmosphere, before we even come to the more Englishy side of things when we get to the script. So I'm wondering as well, last week we heard from some museum staff who were talking about how sort of learning outside the classroom has been, how they've had to adapt during the pandemic, and all the things that you're talking about going to the theatre and experiencing live theatre, and how important that is to making sense of the drama world as a student. The museum colleague that we were talking to, Laura, she was talking about how staff have been going into schools as a way of sort of getting around the social distancing and the bubbles and spaces being closed. How far do you think we're going to see an increase in the number of sort of companies providing for schools in that way, through visits or through open air productions, to sort of continue with a sense of social distancing even after everything is restricted, all the restrictions are lifted? Sorry.
So I think it's really opened doors for a lot of theatre companies to think outside the box in terms of what they can offer and what they can provide. I think there's always the conversation around cost. I think in lots of ways, I really feel for theatre companies. I have a family member who works in the arts. He's been really lucky in terms of the work he's had to work incredibly hard. And I think that for a lot of theatre companies, it's going to be about now making sure that any audiences that they might have felt that they lost, due to the pandemic, that they can find ways to produce work so that those audiences come back. In terms of schools, I think that actually there's more going to be available, because even if schools are not comfortable or schools are not able for those production companies or those groups to come into schools directly, I know a lot of practitioners have been running workshops via Zoom or on Google Meet, which means that actually they can come into the classroom And I know from personal experience as well, once we went back to school in September, I was able to organise quite a few different workshops with some quite well-known practitioners, because they were able to just zoom into the classroom from their own homes. And I have been really, really grateful to that community, and how generous a lot of them have been as well with their time. We always used to look at a lot of theatre practitioners as being, quite expensive, or just don't have the time to come in and speak, because obviously they're working professionally, and a lot of them have offered their time, some of them for nothing, which I think is incredible, when actually they still need to earn money and they still need to work. And I can't say how grateful I've been as a drama teacher that they've done that, really. I'm not saying that's right necessarily, but what I'm saying is how generous people have been and how they've come together. But I think it's been quite interesting seeing as well the amount of theatre companies that have decided to do, outdoor performances. I was reading the other day, I know this is a big company, but like the RSC are opening a whole outdoor theatre space, so at least then you can take groups of students to those kind of performances, and I think also talking to, friends of mine who own their own theatre companies or run their own theatre companies, even in Bristol, they've had to think outside the box in terms of the spaces that they've decided to use as well. So not using theatres as such, but maybe public places or parks and that sort of thing, really. So I think it's just made the theatre world, or I'd like to think it's made the theatre world a lot more exciting. And actually for students, it's really opened their eyes in what is available to them. In terms of performance, I think they don't have to just be thinking about theatre is in a box space, like a theatre house, that sort of thing. That actually theatre can be anywhere. You can do theatre in your car park. You can do theatre in the park. So I think actually we're moving towards a world, hopefully, where actually theatre is starting to become more for everyone.
Really, really nice thoughts there. I mean, I know that there have been so many parks that I've been in where I've just thought, oh, this would be brilliant for a Midsummer Night's Dream, or this would be a fantastic setup for Macbeth in this castle, these open grounds. So I should mention it to somebody that they should do an open air performance this summer. They get loads of tickets sold. So we've got Jess on the chat agreeing with you as well about the generosity of professionals and how much they've offered during this period. So thank you for mentioning them and thanking them for their time and their energy. I wish you all the best with the last few weeks of your pregnancy, Katie. I hope it all goes really well for you, and thank you so much for joining us and talking so passionately about your subject today.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you for having me, and I'll let you know when little one makes an appearance.
Yes, I would love to. I'd love to hear from you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Bye.
So we have absolutely heard from 3 really passionate practitioners today who, in a year of restrictions, in a year where community and the sort of physicality that are so important to so many of these creative arts subjects has maybe seemed like it is on the way out or just not very possible, we've heard how they have time and time again used their creativity and innovation to make sure that not just their subjects are alive, but that their students are still able to access those subjects and enjoy those subjects, and that their subjects have been used as a way to ensure that students have weathered this storm as best they can, and supported their positive mental health with them there. So thank you so much to all 3 guests who have joined us today on Teachers Talk Radio. All our morning break episodes and a full range of Teachers Talk Radio shows are available to catch up via the Podbean app or Spotify. You just need to search Teachers Talk Radio. And I understand now from our tech team behind the scenes that we have been harnessing some fancy live stream technology via Facebook and other social media platforms. So if you are tech savvy, please do check those out soon, or keep an eye on the @TT Radio 2021 handle, and they will give you more information about how to access all of our shows from these different platforms. If you are listening later, do carry on the conversation by sharing your comments or questions. Our guests and the reports and the articles and all the blogs that we mentioned today will be tagged on my personal handle @MaternityCPD and shared by @TTRadio 2021 using the hashtag #TTRadio. I'd also love to join on that thread any recommendations of performances, especially any outdoor performances, or companies who are specialising in performances of art or of dance or drama, or any outside exhibitions that you would recommend our communities to get involved with in order to appreciate the arts that we have available to us at the minute, and increasingly as things open up, but also so that we can make sure that we are financially supporting the arts community, so that when our students do get into adulthood, they still have an arts community left to appreciate and to enjoy as much as we do or have done as adults. So if you're at home on a Tuesday morning enjoying time to yourself with your little ones, like we've had a few today, or have a quiet moment in your office or classroom, you can join us live every Tuesday morning on Teachers Talk Radio for the morning break. And we will see you again next week.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.